Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Kim Schonert-Reichl, a professor at the University of British Columbia in the Faculty of Education, and I'm also the director of the Human Early Learning Partnership, an interdisciplinary research institute focused on child development in the School of Population and Public Health in the Faculty of Medicine at UBC as well. I'd like to begin by just acknowledging the territory in which I am sitting right now and where I'm working today from the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Very happy to be here. So this is the first ever of our Help Coffee Talks, and we wanted to find a way to both reach out to all of the people out there to give some really important information about the science of child development and well-being, and really practical strategies. That's really part of Help's mission: all children thriving in healthy societies. And we know this information is particularly needed at this time in history. People are trying to find out, what do we do to help our children? What do we do to help ourselves? And so it's really important here that we're bringing in some of the top researchers in the world to help us learn more about child development and well-being, and practical strategies that you can use today and in the future. So I'm very excited to be here and honored to have my very first guest, Dr. Molly Lawlor. And Dr. Molly Lawlor is an expert in child and adolescent development and social and emotional development. She has a master's of arts in counseling psychology and a doctorate in the human development learning and culture program at the University of British Columbia. Molly's research includes the investigation of mindfulness and psychological adjustment in children and adolescents, and evaluations of social and emotional learning programs for children and adolescents in school settings. Currently, Molly is the Director of Curriculum and Research for the MindUp program. Some of you might be familiar with that program. And additional projects have included writing for the We Wellbeing program. I mean, Molly can tell us more about that today, as well as other programs that focus on mindfulness, including she's serving as an advisor for the Committee for Children, Mind Yeti, which is a guided mindfulness program as well. Molly is passionate about bringing research to practice in order to make social and emotional learning and mindfulness accessible to children. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Lawlor here today with me. She's not only a great colleague, but also a very close friend. And so it's so exciting to be here having coffee with Molly. And I wish it was in person. I really am so excited to be here with you, Molly, and for everyone to learn from you, because you have been doing such incredible work over the last several years, and we have more to learn about. So, I'm going to start. As we said, we have three questions. But first, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm very excited to start my day with you, one of my dear friends, Kim. And I'm very honored to be your first guest on your coffee talks. I think this is a great idea. And yes, I wish we were together sitting in a little cafe, maybe in Paris, having a croissant and a cafe au
Uh,
lait.
yes,
But I'm
and some
imagining.
croissants. I agree. So, I know you've been doing so much work and research in this area, as well as lots of presentations and communication about how to do translational work to bring this for practice. So, my first question, and we're really focused on parents today, and you as a parent of your two girls, and I hope we talk about them in a bit. How do parents talk to their children about both COVID-19 that's happening today and other events that are unfolding? What are some strategies that you can say would happen that would be informed from your work in counseling as well as your other research?
Yeah, well, I think, the first thing is that there'll be a real variety of experiences for our families everywhere in this time. And the most important thing I would say to families and caregivers and parents is to really build that relationship and just be able to listen. I think one of the things when our children are experiencing any kind of anxiety or worries, we often want to rush in and kind of fix it because we don't like our children to be experiencing these difficult emotions. But what can happen when we just rush in to fix and say, it's okay, it's fine, don't worry about it, is that those feelings don't go away and they can keep bubbling up for the child. So the first thing I would say is to really just listen and validate that experience, even if it isn't really matching. So kids have a tendency to catastrophize, and worry over things, but let them share their worries and then talk about problem solving, because they need to really feel that they're heard. Be my first tip.
And so what do you do, in thinking about parents and thinking about children? What about if parents are really anxious? Like
Mhm.
what do you have to think about then? If I mean, I love how you say validate the feelings, because I think that I know I'm a parent of two boys, young men now, and when they were younger, and even now, I get upset myself when I see them nervous or anxious or things like that. What advice do you have for parents?
Well, I would draw from some of your research, Kim, on around stress contagion, and to understand that what we kind of bring into the room around our own emotional experience, our own ability to regulate emotions, our kids will pick up on that. And this isn't to say that you have to be this perfect, calm all the time person, but just to be aware of what you're experiencing yourself. And for children who are, in their middle years and adolescence, you can start to talk about your own experience with stress and how you're managing, and the things that you're doing, so that we have more of a conversation around it. And it's not something that is bad. We all experience stress. So how do we sort of talk about that as families, and normalize it and understand when we have stress that's bubbling over, and that does happen for us all. We're been I think, what is this, our third month, kind of in the social physical distancing, and and the walls can start to feel smaller in our homes. So we have to really begin with ourselves, really understand where we are as far as our own stress, develop strategies to manage our own stress, and understand when we feel like we can't be fully present for our children, and what do we need to do uh, to get back to being able to be, regulated and managing our stress, to be able to hear our children and really be there for them. So the first thing I would say for parents, and we have to be gentle with ourselves, especially during this time. There's so much upheaval around the world, and many of us, with the social injustice that's happening, many of us are, coming from it, learning about it from a place of being able to learn about racism from a place of privilege, whereas others are, um, living that experience. So really being aware of all of those sort of feelings that can be bubbling up, and bringing some self compassion to ourselves, being gentle, understanding that we don't have to be perfect. And that, this isn't, I remember in the early stage of the pandemic, when things were shutting down, and there were things kind of going around social media like, here's a great time to learn a second language, and what projects are you going to get done, and that's great, and some of us will go off and do that, and it'll be a wonderful productive time. But I want to say, we all don't have to be emerging out of this with a second language, and redecorated our kitchen, and grown a garden, and all of these things. So that's, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but my big message is just be gentle on ourselves, understand our own emotional experience. Whenever you can carve out time to just take a little space for yourself, whether that's a walk around the block or even in the shower, just to really check in and see if you can do some deep breaths to just get yourself centered, to be really present.
And I think you're, one of the key points is this notion of self-compassion, and I think it's a pretty new term. I think people are now starting to learn about it, but that idea of really being, practicing not only compassion for others, like we are now, just by doing, with our physical distancing and our isolation and things, is a compassionate approach to a society to help people. But that self-compassion, I really like that important message. So now I'm thinking about how parents are doing at this time, and do they you're talking about the stress that children are feeling, but how do you talk specifically to your children about the events that are unfolding? And does it matter what age they are, or do we try and keep it back from older kids? I mean, I will say, tell
Yeah.
you, like, I remember back in September 11th when it happened, where it played over and over and over again on the TV, and not my boys were very little, and I remember just thinking I don't want them ever to see that. And I don't know if I did the right thing, but I just wonder what is the advice about actually is children see all these things happening and go and hear
Yeah.
about social distancing.
That's a really good question, and I'm sure you have some ideas yourself. World-renowned developmental psychologist. But I think really is we don't want to avoid it. We don't want to, we can't assume that we can protect our children from seeing images, and we need to be prepared for the questions that they may have. So of course you want to take a developmental approach, and for younger children, really seeing what is their sort of perception of what's happening, and really stay at their level, and at that emotional place of ensuring that they feel safe and secure. That's really a critical thing for all of us, but for young kids, that would be important, that they feel that they're safe and secure with you. And then as children get older, they're able to understand the complexities of society, and that can be disconcerting when there is unfairness in the world, and that is such turmoil and pain happening, and really addressing that with them. One of the things as kids get into middle their middle years and adolescence is their ability to have a sense of agency. What can I do in this time when it feels like we're all so small and there's not a lot we can do? um, there are things that we can do, and really empowering them to think about. I think of our provincial health officer, her words, I think it's to be calm, be kind, and be safe. How can you bring that into the home for children at all different kinds of ages? I know I have a wonderful colleague who with her grandchildren talked about how washing your hands is actually protecting others, and how we're learning about wearing face masks, and how that protects others. And so that those little actions can actually give kids that sense of agency, which is so important for their identity and their ability to feel a sense of control, which when we feel a lack of control is often when anxiety tends to creep in and become problematic.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I of course I have to bring it home a bit because you have two young girls. Well, they're not so young anymore. They're growing up too fast in my eyes. I don't know for you too, but I'm really curious. I know for me, knowing all that I know, and then how do I bring it home to my home? I'm just wondering, have you talked about these things, and what's maybe you could tell Ivy and Rowan.
Yes. So my daughters Ivy and Rowan, for the those tuning in, Ivy is 9 and Rowan is just turned 12. So they're coming at this with a variety of kind of responses and experiences. So just on the pandemic piece, certainly they're feeling a loss of connection to their friends and to school. Rowan loves school and loves the routine and being busy. So that's been a big shift for her, and just acknowledging that. Ivy made a list of everything that was bad about the pandemic the other day, um, and just really acknowledging that there is a sense of loss and there is a sense of grief for them, that they're missing out on things. Summer camps aren't going to be happening. So we are going to have to, as parents and caregivers, sit with that with them, and not be able to fix it. We can't flip a switch and have it all go back to how it was. So really being able to sit with them around that, and then around the social injustice. I know their teachers are actually bringing it into the curriculum at home, and so being able to have a conversation that's developmentally appropriate. So, for example, Ivy um, talked about the pack of crayons when you do art, and that she had friends that referred to one peachy color as skin color. And she commented that that's not really very fair because not everybody has that color for their skin. And so we talked about that and what that meant for those that wouldn't color themselves with that color, if that's called skin color, and would they feel excluded. And so that's sort of a developmental e- little example of how you can begin the conversation and have them really, Kim's area of empathy, be able to have that perspective taking and empathy of what would it feel like if you didn't feel like you were represented, and what does that mean. So I'm very encouraged to see the conversations happening at school, and it's an opportunity for us in the home to examine our own history and think about how what do we need to learn. That's where I am right now, is what do I need to learn alongside my children to ensure that we can move forward in a more positive direction for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. And I know, it is so real for you to, with your girls and having to really see all that's happening, and that it's so great that you have the open communication. And I think that is such an important aspect of this is, like you said before, don't deny their feelings. And it makes me think too about that, recognizing emotions of Dan Siegel's work on it, to name it is to tame it,
Yes.
and the importance of being able to identify those emotions and how they're feeling, and validating. So now I want to really turn to this idea of, um, I mean, you've sort of given some practical strategies and some ideas, but I want you to, you've worked for so long now on all these different SEL programs. So I thought, first, some people might not have heard of SEL. So, you've
Yeah.
been working for now over a decade on social and emotional learning programs for both students in schools, but even teachers. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, I'm thinking, we're assuming most people know what SEL is, but maybe you could just first and say what it is, and then why, what are some practical strategies or these programs, and how they might be helpful both to parents and to educators as well.
Sure. Well, so social emotional learning is really about what are the attitudes, skills, and knowledge that kids and adults, us too, need to know and to have competency around to live a full, productive life. So, in both with regards to learning, but also just being out in the world. So, things like having self awareness, understanding your emotional experience, having social awareness, perspective taking, and empathy, and relationship skills, being able to form healthy relationships and maintain them, and to resolve conflicts peacefully, and then responsible decision making. So being able to make decisions with others in mind, I would say, understanding how what my actions do may affect others. Um, with that being aligned with your own personal values. So that in a nutshell is social and emotional learning.
Thank you.
And I think, and Kim could talk about it in her sleep. But I think, we've been talking this morning a lot about acknowledging difficult emotions, and that's really critical. But the other piece of social emotional learning is really an opportunity to, and the part that I'm quite passionate about is the opportunity to foster well-being and nurture optimism and happiness. And so that's what a lot of my work has been around, in particular with the MindUp program, really bringing together the brain science, neuroscience, along with social emotional learning and positive psychology, and using mindful awareness practice as one means to give kids those skills to build resilience, to build emotion understanding for themselves, and to also become more caring and compassionate citizens of their communities. So it's really about what type of citizens do we want to have come in to take the reins when they leave school. And I think for me, I'm a bit biased, and I really would like a lot of focus on the social side of learning and understanding that that's really what's going to save humanity. Is a big statement.
Yes, no, I totally agree. And I wonder, just I'm thinking of some people out there, some parents who might have signed
Yeah,
in, and you talk about, the MindUp program. So maybe you could, and you talk about neuroscience. So
yeah.
can you, and learning about the brain. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what you've learned about that. And are there any resources out there from MindUp
Yeah.
that parents can find?
Yes. So there's many, many resources out there. I will say this. So when the pandemic happened, I think I'm signed up for like every list serve thing. So it was overwhelming for me, and so that might be the case for many educators and parents as well. So I'll list some of my top picks. Um, but getting back to the neuroscience piece, I think the interesting thing, and this was MindUp was started by Goldie Hawn almost like 17 years ago, and she was very adamant at the time about children learning about their brain and how the brain works and regulates emotion. And so over the years, what we've noticed is that that's been very empowering for students and children to learn, what happens in the brain when you feel stress, what happens when you feel like you can't calm down. And so when they understand that it's just a natural part of development, when we're developing, young children don't have the ability to regulate emotions. And as we get older, our part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, grows and has more capacity to manage strong emotions. But they learn that these things are also malleable, so that you can actually build skills to develop, to be able to regulate your emotions and calm down and feel a little bit more in control. We talked about that earlier, about when we feel out of control, that is a very uncomfortable place to be. So that's been a key piece. And how we do that is through um, mindful practice. So simple attention training practices that are just about deep belly breathing, which has a positive effect in the body. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the way the body calms down. And it helps to train attention in that part of the brain that regulates emotion and is involved in our critical thinking, decision making, and all of those important things. So that's a little bit about the neuroscience and MindUp. And so for those that want to learn more, you can go to the website mindup.org, and there are quite a lot of free materials right now that we have put out as part of the our COVID response, so that educators and parents have these things that can just be done at home. And I'll say, for those that have this opportunity to have more time with our children, there is that time where we can actually build relationships with one another in the home in a positive way and develop these skills together. So for example, one activity would be practicing gratitude. So at the dinner table, what is one thing that you feel thankful for today? And we know from the science of positive psychology that that's actually one of the it's a simple way that you can actually develop a sense of well-being. And the more that you practice these types of things like gratitude and savoring happy memories, you actually kind of develop more of a mindset for positivity.
I love it. And what about so two questions, just because I know the program, but I'm gonna put you there,
Yeah.
is the idea of the kindness. I know
Yeah.
maybe you could talk a little bit about this kindness, because I love that you talked about Dr. Bonnie Henry before. I'm a big fan. I'm not quite yet a member of our fan club, but I will be joining. Where she talks about be kind, be calm, be safe. But is there that maybe talk a little bit about the kindness lessons in Mind Up?
Yeah. So one of the things, so with MindUp, we really begin with the internal piece around the self. So getting kids to understand themselves, be able to regulate their emotions. Then we turn to the social lens and developing perspective taking and empathy, nurturing their own positive mindset through gratitude and learning about optimism. And then kindness is really the active ingredient. When we know from the science that when we're kind to others, we're actually improving our own well-being as well. And so this is a time when we can talk about kindness with our children. What are some things that we can do that are simple things? I know many communities have been doing the painted rocks for encouragement. I go around to local parks and everybody's painting, thank you to our first responders and our healthcare workers, banging pots and pans at 7 o'clock. It's still going strong in my neighborhood. So there are things that children can be involved with that are acts of kindness that, again, I think it does a few things around, again, nurturing that caring and compassion that is so critical for society, but also individual well-being. But also creating that sense of agency, like I can make a difference too, whether it's for older kids going and mowing the lawn of a neighbor who can't manage it, or picking up some groceries, or for younger kids, just going and helping, picking something, or helping a neighbor with something, or drawing thank you cards and mailing them. I know actually one example of my daughter's elementary school was they invited the elementary kids to draw pictures and make cards for the local senior center. And then they would be distributed out to the seniors who are feeling quite isolated right now, of course, due to the pandemic. So there's many things that we can do to foster this kindness in our kids and in ourselves. And hopefully that shared experience will also create positive memories for the family too.
Yeah, and I know, as you said, there's so many resources out there. And since you are really a world expert in developing writing many of these programs, maybe you could talk a bit about some other programs in which you've been
Yeah,
involved for younger kids, like Mind Yeti or the We Wellbeing, and maybe just take a few minutes. We have a few minutes left.
sure.
If you just
Yeah,
mention.
there's a lot of fabulous resources out there, and so I'll share some that I've been involved with and some others as well. So the Mind Yeti it's an app at mindyeti.com, and so there's a free, I think there's 12 audio sessions that are free, and the intention is that they're very simple mindful awareness practices for children and their adults. So from preschool till about grade 5, I'd say, and you can listen to them together. There's different ones for bedtime and for calming down. And so that's a nice way to kind of dip your toe in this idea of mindful practice together with your child. Um, Another one is We Wellbeing. So the We organization, which has been around for a couple of decades, really focused on service learning. And they're doing a really wonderful live broadcast every day for for educators during this time. And then there's also if you go to we.org and click on their educator and We Wellbeing, you'll find some at-home resources as well around positive human qualities and service learning. And certainly that kindness piece is a big one there around altruism. Um, and then I've mentioned the MindUp website as well. And then a couple other places I think are useful would be the Greater Good Science Center has a new SEL resource, free resource page. So this is where a lot of the top social emotional learning and mindfulness, mindful awareness programs have actually contributed free activities and lessons. So for those educators out there listening, that's a really great resource from the Greater Good, which is out of Berkeley. And then the last one is homegrown. The Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education has their Heart Mind Online. And so that one is nice because you can, when you go in, you can click I'm an educator or I'm a parent. And so they have a whole host of activities and simple things that you can do with your children around social emotional well-being.
Those are amazing resources, and we'll be providing links to all of those with this recording. So we'll have certainly those posted on all the links to those will be posted. And I also want to mention that CASTLE, or the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, has a CASTLE Cares webinar series. They're all recorded, and they're now starting a 6-part series on SEL and equity. So that I would say people could tune in there with we'll provide a link to those as well. Molly, it's been so fun. It's gone too quickly. And, you provided such helpful, wonderful, amazing information. And I think, as we close, I just want to thank you so much. I can't wait to be in person with you again, and be able to have real coffee at our place. At least Laughing Bean may be up the street where we have met many times. And I also want to just cue people into our next Help Coffee Talks. Takes place on June 18th and includes another special guest and very good friend of both Molly and myself, Dr. Laura Boyd, who is a Canada Research Chair and also a neurobiology of motor learning director in the Brain Behavior Laboratory as well. She's a professor at UBC. So, and here's just a picture, and then we have it in our last of their 3-part Help Coffee Talk series is Dr. Tish Jennings, who is an expert on mindfulness for teachers, and also just came out with a recent book on trauma informed practice. And this is just a picture of Molly, myself, and Tish when we were in Dharamsala, India, about a year and a half ago at an event with the Dalai Lama. Thank you all for joining. This is really such an incredible opportunity I'm having. It's such a treat that I get to have this time with my friends to help share some of the latest science and practical strategies. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.